In this video, I will talk about democracy and democratic participation, and how through such participation we have the power and capacity to become a demos, that is, a people. Let us go back to the basics and look at how freedom is related to all this. The two prominent views of freedom that lie at the heart of democracy are the liberal view and the Kantian view. On the liberal view, freedom is about having more options or the absence of constraints, while the Kantian view, emerging out of Immanuel Kant's philosophy, is about autonomous action and the ability to self-determine and sovereignty. Simply put, we're either free from constraints or we're free to act a certain way. So freedom has to do with action. But what does this mean? Does this entail that we are all interested in acting? Perhaps not. And most of the time we understand this as freedom from politics, articulated in the statement, the government cannot tell me what to do, I am free. But what's the reason for this? The reason is because I can self-govern. When we recall Monty Python and the Holy Grail and the encounter between Dennis and King Arthur, we hear Dennis eloquently put that he will not obey the king because ladies lying in ponds cannot bestow political authority, for such authority should come from the mandate of the masses. So does this entail then, this ability to self-govern, entail that everybody's interested in public political decision-making, that everybody's showing courage in the public sphere, or that they're forming governing bodies? All these modes of action are possible but not necessary. Yet recall Alexis de Tocqueville and his insights on democracy in America. In the 1800s, de Tocqueville talks about the grip of democracy and the excitement that the people have through political participation and assembly by having this democratic government or the system of self-governance in America. So people like to belong, both back then and today. Yet we have a bit of alienation, perhaps sometimes, from our democratic systems. So what is democracy? Going back to its ancient Greek roots, the demos and the elements of demos and kratos, that is the people, and power or rule, and this latter distinction will become a little important for us later, we can see the two tenets of the demos to be equality and liberty. That is the equality of all who are eligible and the liberty of all who are independent or non-dominated. While on the side of kratos, we have will or voice. So in the electoral option for our democracies, eligibility requirements exclude non-citizens, felons, and other unprivileged groups. Does this mean that we need to give up on democracy, that it's somehow inherently flawed? What makes democracy desirable? How can we think of democracy further? First, what makes democracy desirable is that perhaps the right to participate or the right to have a voice, to be listened to and heard, and the ability to be recognized in one's audibility and listenability. What would be at stake if we could not democratically participate? As Roger Berkowitz elucidates it in the first video of this series, we risk the loss of a common world. But this loss is not inevitable. We can sustain a world together in common, but first we need to create it. So in this instance, let us think about how we can think of democracy further and recall the elements of democracy, and let's take up the element of power and rule. In representative electoral democracy, what is emphasized is the will of the individual or the collective, because decisions need to be made. An individual's will may be said to be determined by selfish or self-interested reasons, while the collective similarly may act out of group interests. In both instances, we may forgo the fact of plurality of our existence and simply forget that we inhabit and share a world with so many others. So what is the alternative? We have a few ways of thinking about democracy. The first instance is what has happened in the Agora. The Agora is still an exclusionary space by way of having excluded enslaved people and women from being citizens. The better, improved, egalitarian version of the voting booth becomes a most private place where we need to make a most public decision, and we're left alone. So while we don't have the exclusion that pertained to the Agora, we don't have the togetherness that was entailed from the Agora. So what's the alternative? Sortition, that is the random selection of people by lot to discuss issues that pertain to their society or their communities, becomes this place where we can discuss and take up things that are common to us in our world and make decisions together. So this type of sortition-based togetherness emphasizes the power of and as acting together in the world. And in this sense, it gives us an ability to think freedom anew as it emerges in collective action and deliberation. Indeed, Hannah Arendt, the 20th century philosopher, had something to say about this. The way in which we have the joy of public happiness in our concerted action with our peers, we can manifest our freedom and build worlds together. Such joys of public happiness rest on the equality and plurality of participants and the exchange of opinions and ideas through deliberation and dialogue. It is in this sense that the human being shows their capacity to take heed of the fact of plurality of the world and indeed acknowledge or foster it as a norm to be created and preserved. For Hannah Arendt, power is actualized only where word and deed have not parted company, where words are not empty and deeds not brutal, where words are not used to veil intentions but to disclose realities, and deeds are not used to violate and destroy but to establish relations and create new realities. It is in this sense that we have the capacity of world building, and it can only emerge out of our collective action and discussion together.